Weekend warriors, we drinking it down. Raise your voices and stare at this town. We're the champions of craft beer sport. Tall Can Audio, we hold down the fort.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome inside a brand new edition of the Tall Can Audio podcast. Matt Robinson with you in the TCA studio in beautiful Bytown, Canada. I hope everybody's having a great week. Looking forward to talking a little Blue Jays today with our buddy Arden Zwelling from Sportsnet. We normally check in with him a couple times per season. Always look forward to that. We'll get to him in just a second, but wanted to remind you that on the last edition, Rob was in here, as we've been calling it, to speak for his people. The Sens and Leafs, one game in the books as we speak right now. Leafs have a 1-0 series lead. They get back at it on Tuesday night, so we'll be back after that with another episode of the show to kind of see where things stand in the series at that point. So make sure you go ahead and check that out. Get subscribed wherever you're hearing us right now, and follow along on social media at Tall Can Audio. But with all that out of the way, let's get right into it with our friend Arden Zwelling from Sportsnet. It's been a little while since we've chatted, man. How you been?
I'm well, man. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Always appreciate you making some time. You're down in sunny Houston. I'm sure that's a little nicer than where you've been on the road here so far. We'll get to the Blue Jays in just a second, but I've noticed here lately, since Sportsnet picked up the rights to the UFC, they've got you doing that a little bit, man. How's that been treating you?
Oh, it's been great. I'm a fan first and foremost, so I was pretty excited when Sportsnet picked up those rights. And yeah, there's just been more opportunities for UFC content since then, and I've been happy to take those on because I love the sport. I find it fascinating. I find the athletes really, really interesting. And there's really just like nothing like the aura and the vibe of a big fight. And getting to be at some of those on the night in the arena, it's a tremendous buzz, and it's just really cool to cover and write about and learn about. So I've really enjoyed it.
I'm sort of curious to get your take on where you think the company stands right now, the promotion stands right. It sort of felt over the last few years like, every month there was some big star. They had, long-standing guys, Kamaru Usman and Izzy Adesanya, guys who were like running their division. Then all of a sudden we kind of got into this place where it seemed like there was a bunch of turnover almost constantly. And maybe they're not currently loaded with the same star power, big names. Am I off base with that, do you think? Or are they kind of in a rebuilding spot here? Or?
Beauty's in the eye of the beholder a little bit, right? Like, I think that like hardcore UFC fans will watch anything, right? And I kind of count myself among those. So like I get just as up for like an Alexandra Pantoja fight or a Merab fight as I would for a John Jones one. And I get it, people kind of measure the sports popularity, I guess, based on the crossover appeal and whether stars in the UFC break through into the mainstream like a Ronda Rousey did, or like a Conor McGregor did. And maybe we're not seeing quite as much of that right now, but we're also seeing the UFC earn more revenue than it ever has right now. We're seeing the sport more popular now than it's ever been, and we're seeing it setting gate records and selling out arenas, and we're seeing it signing $billion broadcast deals. So there's a bit of distance there for me between the people who say that the UFC lacks stars and lacks crossover appeal versus how well that business is running. They're just printing money. So I think that like an Alexander Volkanovski or like a Merab, like I said, an Islam Makhachev, these are just like profoundly talented fighters. And if you're into just like the beauty of the sport and the tactical nature of the sport and the competition of it, there's never been a better time to watch UFC. And there's never been more talented and skilled and proficient fighters in the sport. If you're more into the drama and the pageantry and some of the smack talk, I guess, yeah, maybe there's something to be desired without like a Conor McGregor, without the Diaz brothers, etc. But drama is easier to understand than beauty, but so that has more appeal. But beauty is pretty great too, and UFC has a lot of that to offer. So it really is just what you're looking for out of it. I understand the complaint from the casual side, but I think that for people who are just really, really into UFC and MMA in general, I don't know that there's ever been a better time to be a fan.
This is how we know you're an educated UFC guy. You didn't just stop at Marab. You dove right in with the last name there, which would be a bit of a mouthful. They're in Montreal next month. Are you going to be covering that? You're going to be there in person?
I will be there. Yes.
You looking forward to that card?
Oh, 100%. Bilal Muhammad and Jack Della Maddalena at the top of it is, a really interesting fight. Like Bilal is kind of a cool late career champion. I love those stories of guys who just like grind away and chip away and finally get their opportunity and breaks through. And that fight in particular is kind of holding up so many different things because, if Jack Della Maddalena wins, well, he could be facing Islam Makhachev at 170 after that. If Bilal Muhammad wins, it sounds like Makhachev won't move up because those guys are teammates. So that means Makhachev will likely stay at 155. And then does he fight Ilya Topuria there, or is there another fight in the cards? I mean, there's just like a lot of things that are kind of held up in the result of this fight. And then even beyond that, you've got Jose Aldo on this card, who is like a living legend, and any opportunity to see him fight at this point in what is like the, fourth or fifth reincarnation of his career is just an absolute privilege. And then, you got Benoit Saint Denis trying to bounce back. Obviously, you've got the Shevchenko title fight. It sounds like we're all
Brandon, he's one of my favorite. I like her a lot. Yeah.
Oh yeah, 100%. It seems like we're kind of moving towards a super fight between her and Wei Zhang at some point, but Manon Fiorot is no joke, right? So I think she'll push her here. I mean, this is someone who's 12-1 as a professional. So there's a lot of interesting matchups on this card.
Yeah, it's kind of weird that it's been this long since they've been to Montreal. For a while there, it was a hub during the St. Pierre and Cote days. So I think it's been, what did they say, 2015 or 2014 since they've been there maybe. But long time. Should be a lot of fun. I'm a little envious you're going to be there. They love their fights in Montreal. Should talk a little Blue Jays since I got you here. And I'm curious, man, when we look right now, and as you and I talk, they just dropped the first game of the series to Houston on Monday night. A bit of a rough one, but they have been off to a pretty good start. It is small sample sizes. We are not even out of April yet, so you try not to read too much into anything really. But I'm curious, when you saw the schedule that they were going to have and how heavy it was, what did you think like a reasonable expectation of this team would be through April? And then in relation to that, how do you think they've done?
Well, yeah, considering the quality of competition when you're opening against Baltimore, and then you've got a 3-city trip through Citi Field and Fenway Park and Camden Yards, and you got to play the Braves in there. Seattle's always tough on the Jays. They're playing the Astros right now. They got the Yankees on the weekend, then they got Boston again. Cleveland's a good team. It's one of the toughest schedules to open a season of any team in MLB. So I think that a lot of people looked at it and thought, hey, if you can get through that with your head just poking above 500, you can feel pretty good about it, and you can feel like you're well positioned to get into some of the softer parts of your schedule through late spring and early summer. And as we sit here today on April 22nd, Blue Jays are 12-11. Mm-hmm. So that is the definition of your head just poking above 500 by literally a game. And look, the flaws of this team have been very easy to spot. To this point, they're playing in far too much leverage. They're not scoring enough runs and giving their bullpen big enough leads to avoid really high stress innings. And we've seen the results of that in the way the Blue Jays have had to push their starters pretty far early into the year, how much they've had to ask of their bullpen and of their leverage relievers early in the year. And then obviously we've seen the lack of power. It's a team that's hit the second fewest home runs in baseball to this point, and they've got one of the lowest isolated power stats in baseball. They got one of the lowest barrel rates. I mean, the power just has not shown up. And to your point, we're not even 15% of the way into the season, so you want to give it a bit more time to play out. But if that continues, it's a completely major fatal problem for the team. Like if this continues, they're not going to be successful. It's going to be a really bad season if they don't start hitting homers. I think that everyone just kind of has to put their trust in the fact that statistical variance is a thing and that it eventually will happen. But it'd be a lot easier to have that trust if you saw at least a bit of pop from the top of the lineup.
It's wild, that you say that, and this is factoring in a surprisingly good offensive start at the very beginning of the season from Andres Jimenez, who suddenly looked like he was going to show some power. But since the end of that Washington series, I think he's batting like a $165 or something like that. It hasn't been particularly good lately, and they've tried him at the cleanup spot. He's not a traditional cleanup kind of guy. Obviously, there was some other thinking that goes into that, get him ahead of Kirk and give him some speed on the base kind of thing. What do that was an interesting trade over the course of the offseason. It was an expensive guy, and I think most people understood you were bringing him in for his defense. But, where do you think he fits in the lineup long term, and what is a reasonable expectation for him offensively?
Well, his numbers on the year this year are at least better than they were last year, which is sort of damning with faint praise a little bit. But you'll take that. The Blue Jays believe there's more in the bat, and certainly more than he's shown through these first 22, 23 games, whatever it's been. So, it was certainly encouraging to see that power early on. It was definitely encouraging to see how hard he was hitting the ball in spring training after just making some swing changes, opening up a little bit in his stance and tweaking some things with his approach. We'll see how this continues to play out. Like, look, obviously pitchers have had a lot of success against him over the last two seasons. I mean, really since that 2022 year, which was like MVP caliber, he's had a ton of difficulty just producing offensively. And look, there's no questioning the defense. We're talking about the best second base defender, maybe the best infield defender in the game. There's no questioning the speed and the base running. There's no questioning just like the mettle and the poise and the confidence that he plays with despite the offensive struggles that he's had. This is not a guy who carries that into the field. And this is not a guy who ever looks hesitant or rattled or scared or in his head. Like, this is a player who plays with a ton of confidence, which is an hard thing to quantify, but something that I think goes a long way. But certainly the Blue Jays think that, there's more in that bat than he's shown, not just this year, but over the last couple. And it's going to be up to David Popkins, Lou Ionata, some of the Blue Jays hitting folks to help them get that out. I don't think that the expectation is that MVP caliber year again, but I do think the expectation is something closer to a league average hitter, which we haven't seen in a couple seasons.
Do you think there's, with what's going on right now and in the lineup, you're seeing a lot of youth or new guys being injected here with Alan Roden and Will Wagner and Andres Jimenez? You mentioned a few minutes ago the lack of power we've seen in this lineup. Do you think this lineup is going to be good enough to keep them in this kind of wild card race? Or, everybody sort of talked about it coming out of spring. It sort of feel like they came up maybe one bat short again. Is that something they're going to have to address, or what do you think?
Yeah, ultimately it comes down to your best players being your best players. Like, it's great to get contributions down the lineup, and it would be huge if the Blue Jays got this like surprising year from, like you said, an Alan Roden or a Will Wagner who take a step and show up and are like, hey, all of a sudden I'm an above average offensive contributor, and I'm doing a lot of really positive things for you out of the 6 or 7 spot in the batting order. Like, that would be just huge, and that would be helpful. But for the Blue Jays to get where they're trying to go, Bo Bichette, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., and Anthony Santander have to be very, very good. Like, they have to play to their potential. They have to hit for power. They have to be well above league average players in order for the Blue Jays to be successful. Like, it's really just that simple. The George Springer contributions to this point, those are certainly welcome. The Blue Jays are happy to see it, certainly the way that things have gone the last couple of years, but he's also still 36. So, and it's also still the middle of April. So you got to see that sustain. It's been great to see it to this point, but the much greater sample that we've had of this guy in his mid-30s is not what we've seen so far. So look, we're like 100 plus plate appearances into the season right now, and Vlad and Bo are hitting the ball very hard. That's good. A lot of the process indicators are really solid, but those haven't really turned into home runs yet. And Anthony Santander is in his like traditional April slump, which has been the case throughout his entire career. The sooner that he can come out of it, the better. There were 100 play appearances in, and these guys have like 550 more to go. The next 550 have to be much better than they've been for Vlad, for Bo, and for Santander. If they are not, it's just not going to be a successful Blue Jays season.
Yeah, you mentioned Bo a little bit there. He's been off to a fantastic start, which has been fun to see after what he's been through over the last year or two. And, Obviously as a greedy sports fan, as soon as we saw the big investment in Vlad get thrown down, attention immediately turns to Bo. And all right, Mr. Rogers, I know you just spent $11 billion on the NHL rights and another $500 million on Vlad, but now we'd like Bo. And obviously the fact that he had a rough year last year was going to make it very tough to come to an agreement. Do you think he's interested in staying? I know we've heard him say he wants to win a championship with Vlad. Do you think this is one of those ones where he has to go out to free agency and see what's out there for him before they can reach an agreement? How do you kind of see that playing out?
I do think he's interested in staying, and I think that the Blue Jays are interested in retaining him. I think the difficulty is just how you arrive at a value that makes sense for team and for player, because Bo's last 12 to 16 months have been just so unusual with the injury troubles that he had last year, and then just the productivity troubles that he had last year when he was on the field. And so far this season, I mean, he looks great. Like, he is hitting the ball really, really hard. He's being aggressive. Yes, he is chasing, but sometimes when he's chasing a lot is actually when he's at his best. It's,
Right.
last year when he was slumping, like, he was hardly chasing. Like, he actually was doing a lot of that, play discipline stuff that people like me like to preach, and the results weren't there. So he might just be that unusual player who has to be aggressive and has to take wild hacks and has to look foolish at the plate sometime in order to be who he can be. So if he keeps making the quality of contact that he's made to this point, like, he's just going to have a superstar season. Like, it's just, if he keeps putting the ball in play at high rates of speed and barreling things up the way he has been, eventually, damage numbers are going to follow. If you look at his expected statistics to this point, they are way above his actual batting average and slugging percentage so far. And that's a guy who's hitting like 310. It's not like those numbers are bad right now. He's nearly got a 400 slug, but it could be much better for how hard he's barreling the ball. So it really comes down to, like, how much weight do you put into what you're seeing from him right now? How much weight do you put into what you saw from him last year? How much weight do you put into how you project him going forward? And just considering how difficult it's going to be to sort of arrive at that sweet spot where both sides are like, yeah, this makes sense for us. It may be a situation, as you alluded to, where Bo has to go to the market and get that third party to really settle where the value is, because free agency is just the ultimate determiner of that, where you go out and it's, hey, what can you get? Because that'll tell you exactly what your value is. And then Bo can go out and get an offer, and the Blue Jays can decide to exceed it or match it or not make their own offer. But, as you said, Bo has said he wants to play the rest of his career with Vladdy. Obviously, he wants to win, and the Blue Jays are now positioned to need to be all in for the next 7 years over the first half of the Vlad contract. So I think that helps, and the Blue Jays have said they want to retain him. It's really just going to come down to whether they can sort out where that value lies prior to free agency, or if they're just going to need that third party to settle it for them.
Do you think they are in position? I agree with you that with it, when you sign a contract like Vlad, it leaves you pot committed to try and contend. But they have an oddly constructed payroll right now in terms of, they're paying, well into the luxury tax just to be a wild card team. Do you think they will be given the resources to perhaps have to issue's not the right word, but give out another contract that won't be quite like Vlad's, but will be in the neighborhood of some of these other superstars? Will they have the resources to do it?
Oh, yeah. And if you're going to be signing a Bo Bichette, I mean, we're talking 9 figures and then some, right? Like, he's likely going to be looking for the Corey Seager deal, which was like 10 years, $325 million.
Yeah.
And I bet you the floor is like the Willie Adames deal, which was 7 years, $182 million. That's probably where the Blue Jays enter, and Bo enters at the Seager level, and they kind of try to meet somewhere in the middle. So it's going to be a substantial contract, but the Blue Jays are in a position where they have to give out substantial contracts because they just aren't producing enough talent from within. Like, if they had superstars coming out of their minor league system, providing upward pressure on the roster and replacing some of the talent that inevitably leaves via free agency or underperforms, this would be a different conversation. You could be like the Dodgers and let Corey Seager walk and let Manny Machado walk. You could be like the Astros and let George Springer walk and trade Kyle Tucker and just have that in those, developmental pieces internally who you have brought along within your system to replace them and give you that, like, efficient, low cost production and have this self-sustaining, contending, winning team. The Blue Jays haven't done that because they haven't done a good enough job drafting and they haven't done a good enough job developing. So they must spend in free agency, not just on the position player side, but on the pitching side as well, where really their entire rotation right now is made up of free agents, from Chris Bassett to Kevin Gausman to, look, they traded for Jose Barrios and extended him, but again, not a homegrown product. So until they start drafting and developing better, they're just going to have to run high payrolls and inefficient payrolls, because that's the only way that they're left with in order to build winners around Guerrero.
One of the guys I was really looking forward to watching this season was actually Eric Swanson, who last year had a pretty tough season and got off to a tough start with what happened around his family there at spring training. Totally understandable that his mind would be elsewhere. And, I don't know how much you believe in the idea of, a spring being able to, derail your entire season, but he ends up coming in, getting hurt at spring training this year. I'm curious, what you've heard about when we might, be seeing more of him, and, whether you think he'll be able to kind of ramp up, or are we looking at a potentially another damaged season?
Yeah, weird couple of years for him as he's just kind of, ridden the volatility roller coaster that a lot of relievers do. He was, so good in his final year in Seattle, and then they're really useful in his first year with the Blue Jays in 2023. And then obviously last year dealt with a lot of execution issues with his splitter, leaving it in really bad parts of the zone where it was getting hammered, dealt with some tipping issues as well that, look, if you're leaving pitches in a really bad part of the plate and hitters know those pitches are coming, that's a pretty bad recipe in the big leagues. You're going to get hit pretty hard when that's happening. And then the injuries come along behind that, which he was dealing with late last year, and then this spring as well with the elbow issues. So, look, he pitched in a sim game on the weekend. He's got a bullpen early this week, and after that, he could go off on a rehab assignment, or you could throw another sim game prior to a rehab assignment. But we're probably looking at being a couple weeks away, 2 or 3 weeks from him coming back and being part of the Blue Jays bullpen. But if the Blue Jays can get the 2021, 2022, 2023 guy, that's huge. That's a leverage reliever. That's a guy who you're not afraid to, give a slim lead in the 7th or 8th inning. That would be a boon for the Blue Jays bullpen, but we haven't seen that guy in a while. So he's got to prove health, and he's got to prove effectiveness with his execution and his ability to really disguise his splitter from his fastball and get back to what made him really good in the past.
The other fun story was supposed to be Max Scherzer, and this is starting to feel a little bit like the Joey Votto thing last year, where, I was really excited to have this legend, even if he's not, going to be what he once was. It was going to be a fun story to have him around. But he's, I guess, had a second cortisone shot. Now, what are you hearing about him, and what are you expecting for him maybe the rest of the way here?
Yeah, it's an odyssey with Max and with this thumb. I was talking to him yesterday, and nobody's as frustrated about this as he is. And this has been 3 years now that he's been dealing with this. And I was talking to him yesterday because he just got back from Florida, where he got a second cortisone shot into the thumb. He got one when he first experienced this at the end of March into one of his thumb joints, started throwing again, and then another thumb joint was going in problems. So that's why he had the second one in the second thumb joint. And unfortunately, there are actually 3 joints in the thumb, so it's possible there's a third one coming. He's had cortisone shots in all 3 of these joints several times over the last couple of years. So, these are his words, quote, "I'm not out of the woods yet." And he's not. He's got to get back to throwing and gripping the ball properly and feeling pain-free without discomfort when he is throwing, because when he has that pain in his thumb, it's not just about his thumb. When he's throwing, he then compensates with his forearm and with his elbow all the way up to his lat and his shoulder. It creates a whole host of problems all the way up his arm if he's not able to grip the ball the way that he needs to throw his pitches effectively and locate them and manipulate the ball in the way that he wants to. So he really needs to get this thumb issue just zeroed out before he's back on the mound. So look, he threw here yesterday in Houston. Talking to him afterwards, he said it felt as good as it has in a while. That's positive, but you need to see how he feels the next day, and then when he throws, and the day after that, and the day after that. And if all goes well, he could begin ramping back up and get back on a mound, but he's essentially restarting spring training. So it's going to take some time to rebuild that arm strength, that endurance, deliberately increase pitch volume, he's going to have quite a runway to get back to the Blue Jays. So you can essentially write off the month of May and revisit this in June and see where he's at and if he's ready to return. It's a really disappointing situation for all involved.
Last thing for you then, I normally lead off the show with this, but slipped my mind somehow. I know typically or historically you've been a bit of a craft beer guy. I also know, though, sometimes you pump the brakes through the off season, but have you tried anything good lately?
Not lately. I am in a brake pumping period at the moment. If anybody's looking for good non-alcoholic beers, can recommend Harmon's. That's a really good purveyor, I guess, of non-alcoholic beers. You get them in a bunch of grocery stores. But yeah, we typically bring it back into the menu in the summer. Typically when I head up north, do a little bit of like hiking and paddling and stuff. And when I go up there, always make sure to stop by in Gravenhurst at Sawdust City.
Nice.
It's really quality. Love their stuff, wide variety of styles. They do a really good job, clearly care about the quality and the craft of it. And they're just super consistent. They've got a bunch of obviously flagship brands that everyone sees in the LCBO, but they are the exact same every time you get them, right? Like their quality is high throughout. So I really appreciate that in a craft brewer. So shout out Sawdust City. Get up there in the summer.
Perfect, man. Yeah, I love their stuff. And I don't think I've ever actually been in the facility, but yeah, they're around. You can order delivery from there as well. They'll ship it right to your front door, which is handy as hell. And like you said, very consistent, very nice stuff. So always appreciate you making some time for me. I know you're a busy guy, and I'm sure the weather in Houston right now, you'd rather be outside than talking to me, but I appreciate the time, man. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Always a pleasure, Matt.
There goes Arden Zwelling. So always cool to talk to him. He's an interesting guy. I really enjoy the way he's able to break down baseball. He and Ben Nicholson-Smith do a fantastic job on At the Letters, talking Blue Jays there every week. So if you're into such things, check it out. They have kind of this keen analytical eye for the game and then explain it like Rob and I talked about yesterday to someone like me who maybe enjoys the analytics but doesn't understand them quite as well as those guys. It's kind of a good show for everybody where they can kind of break down the numbers for you in a way that makes sense. Always enjoy At the Letters. That's where we'll wrap this one up. Leafs and Sens go again on Tuesday night, so we'll be back on Wednesday, probably later in the afternoon again with another episode, kind of talking about where things stand with that. And we'll see where the Blue Jays are at that point as well. Hopefully get back on track here against Houston. So that's where we'll put a bow on this one. Thank you so much for listening. My name is Matt Robinson. Have yourselves a great day. And we'll talk to you next time.
Yo, Warriors are drinking it down. Raise your voices and stare at this town. We're the champions.